We will start with the lecture by Herman Hertzberger. We'll have a short break, and after that, a lecture by Jan-Peter Wingender of Office Winhof. And after that, the questions. You can ask questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. You have to, first of all, to put on your camera, because otherwise you cannot be put on, but please raise your hand, and then we can let you come into the lecture. Let me first shortly, I think that Herman Hertzberger needs no introduction. I think that Herman is the first one we have here, architect lecturing, who has already a building that is listed, that already is a monument. So I think that there is, that's quite respectful achievement. Well, Herman Hertzberger studied architecture in Delft and started at a very young age with his office in 58. And then he was part of the structuralism and of the review forum, which in that time was very groundbreaking review in that time. And I must say that I come from TU Delft. I was educated in Delft. And well, I must say that I also I can very well remember the Tuesday morning 10:45 lectures by Herman Hertzberger, who would then passionately describe and talk about the social interactions, about architecture, but also the interactions, how people live and experience architecture. And I think that it has formed a whole generation of architects. And I think that in that sense, I'm very happy that as social aspects have been a big part into how you perceive, so how people are communicating with each other. In his school designs, in his theaters, was all about how people perceive and how you can make a world with architecture, and how you can improve connections, communication, and community feeling. And in that sense, I think it's super interesting that today we have Herman Hertzberger here about social change, and that now, many years later, that still everything that he has been writing about in the last decades, because he made many books, I would really recommend you to read those books, but that now that we are in a pandemic, and that all kind of social relations with people and how we perceive architecture has been changing, that now we have Herman Hertzberger here, who is going to talk with that, but also with the eye that things are maybe for a very long term, so that maybe not so much has changed, that we still have to think how a person is communicating with his neighbor, how you are communicating with the street, how you are communicating with public space, how children are communicating in their schools with each other. And maybe it has become more urgent than ever. So we are very happy to have Herman here, who is going to tell everything about it. And he already confessed to me that he will not follow the normal way of talking just about 2 or 3 projects, but he wanted to passionately talk about architecture. After Herman, we will have Jan-Peter Wingender. And it's interesting to know also that there is all kind of relationships between Jan-Peter Wingender. He has been educated in Eindhoven. So he is one of your, the alumni here of Eindhoven. And he studied at Berlage with Herman Hertzberger. So there are all kind of connections, they know each other. And Jan-Peter Wingender is passionate from Office Winhof, is passionate about detailing, materialization, but also in how connection between people are being made. And he will be showing also a great deal how to make architecture, how details are being conceived, but also how reuse and how different aspects in his projects where also reuse, refurbishing of existing buildings is being made. So for now, Herman, floor is yours. I will be happy to invite you to proceed and to give your lecture.
Fijn dat er zoveel mensen zijn. I'm very happy to see such a large audience. You know, I saw at a moment 2 pictures lying on the table. I have to learn this. These 2 pictures I saw lying on the table, and I was surprised to find out that a building, a construction like the amphitheater of Arles, and the Romans, as you know, made amphitheaters everywhere where they had their cities. And I found out that sometimes it could be a walled town, and in another situation it could be an open place, the same construction. And that put me on the track that change is possible in architecture. And since the world is changing rapidly today, you know, every week there are new inventions and new ways of thinking. That why architects forget about changing, and why do they all make monuments, you know, like pieces of art, and you can't touch them, and they are as they are, and they show the world the acrobatics of, you know, what a sculpture can be, and consequently, our buildings are just impossible after some time. So I learned that we should find ways to make buildings transformable. And so I started to work on space units, you know, a building that is composed from different parts. And I learned that from Louis Kahn, who did this before, and also Aldo van Eyck in his orphanage, to make simple structures, constructions, in such a way that you can change. Oh, sorry, I have to learn this. You see that this building, this office building, has different functions here and they're all made in the same constructive space units. And this is, for instance, a proposal to make it into housing. And I think we should learn to make our buildings in such a way that they, at the end of the day, could be changed, could be transformed into housing. We have to make 100,000 dwellings a year, which is completely impossible. And we need all our old buildings to transform in such a way. You see that this idea to make units, you can use them as an office. You can make them for education. You could make a classroom out of it. You could use it as a restaurant, and finally also to I can't learn this. It started as an office building, and it could also be a dwelling, you know. And maybe this is a lesson for architects. And you see, the roofs could be gardens and sun panels, and so this building, originally made as an office building, could become a complete town. Could become, but because it's quite difficult in terms of finances and so on, and people doubt whether you should use old buildings. They think it's a great risk, and I'm fighting. Most of my time I'm spending on fighting these people and these ideas. Another idea is that I think a building should be one space. In fact, a building should be more like a city, not made in cubicles, not making slices. You know, people make buildings like this in slices, and I think we should make our buildings more like cities where there's connection, possibility of connection between people, and you see that there's a space in between this units in such a way that you can see, uh, not bad, you know, and that there's a sort of connection and a feeling of belonging, the feeling that you are not alone, that you're part of some well, maybe even a community, but we are not in the church. And I learned from the Paris galleries the idea to make spaces that are outside and inside at the same time. So there are an outside space inside. And in this way, I made in between this space units, I made an area which is like the street. And in the street, you can meet each other and say, what are you doing, to the other? And they say, oh, well, that's interesting. Then we should talk together because I am on the same track and maybe we could learn something from each other, you know, which is a sort of the in-between space, the space which is not determined by a specific function, but which can be used in different ways. And this is the problem today, because people want to make money, and they only can make money with spaces which are functionally determined. You know, so many euro per square meter. And this is part of our fight. Uh, and you see the space, and you see all the places, everywhere places where you can see, and there are coffee bars. I mean, this was the first building where there were no coffee girls with the charts going through the office, but the people could come to the coffee bar and take a coffee when they wanted. And the very conservative director said, well, this is a problem, because then people won't work anymore. And then the progressive director said, well, that's a bright idea, because then at, at last we can see who is working in this firm, you know. So they did it. And this is very important space, although you cannot say it's for this purpose or for that purpose. It's just free space. It's, in fact, it's street, you know. It's street in the building. I adapted this idea of space, and architecture is not about facades, in my opinion. Everything I'm saying is just my idea, and you can share it or not. That also in a school, you should have this space connection to see where the nice people are walking, and to see which people you have to be aware of. They still get money from you, so you have to be able to be away, you know. So you should see each other, and have the possibility to meet, maybe accidentally. And this is the stairway in the Flux building over there. You can almost you can see it from here almost. And this is in fact a sliced building, because it's all laboratories and things. So I thought in the middle we should have a big space with a stairway in such a way that you, well, you have the street, and in the street you see nice guys and beautiful girls, and people you can learn from, and people that you're just saying hello, how are you, or just hello, or try to get, oh no, I should not go there because there is this terrible person, you know. This is the social meaning, I think, of architecture. And this I also made into a principle, that you should not make stairs in this way, like going up and, you know, like this, but that you should make stairs always in such a way that you have a view on each other. And you see the result again in a school. This is a school in Amsterdam, and you see the feeling of being in a city within the building. This idea of not make slices. I mean, we have towers today of I don't know how many floors, and these floors are completely isolated from one another. And this is a sort of emphasis on the idea of the isolation of people, to protect people. Our architecture, I'm sorry to say, is to protect people from each other. It's in fact like the Dutch politics. They do the same thing. They make all the laws they are making are to protect people from each other. And what we try to do is to make to find mechanisms to not just protect people from each other, separate people from each other, but try to make mechanisms to um, to get them into connection, into social contact. And you see in this scheme what I'm thinking we could do, which is called split level. And the fire department hates it. And it's very difficult to get it done because you make one big space, and also the fire department tries to isolate cubicles instead of making one space. Again, I'm referring to the idea of the building as a city. And I thought, since there was no money to make an auditorium in the school, I thought we should make the communal space into a sort of auditorium by making steps. And they are used for official, but also for unofficial things, you know. I mean, when one of the pupils behaves in some way, there are always people sitting and say, okay, go on, you know. So it's again making connections. And I mean, again, this I learned. There's no idea, I have no idea, which is just an idea that came from heaven, from God to me. Everything I did, I explored, was first came in by my eyes and my ears, and especially my eyes. You must have eyes to see everywhere, wherever you are, in which or what situation, things you can, I can use that. This is interesting, you know. You have this sort of exploring, you need this exploring eyes. And I was in New York, and this was the Columbia University library. And these stairs are made for the idea, monumental ideas, to the fact that you're going up, you know, very solemn, with the idea that books are very important, holy books, and you know, so it's put on a socle. And I was surprised to see that this architectonic element was used completely in the other way. It was used as a sort of grandstand for people who are listening to this person who is telling them some revolutionary ideas. And so what was used, what was meant to be a monumental thing became the opposite of monumental, the completely not monumental use. And this is in fact for me, the beginning of this sort of steps. And I found out that people use them also as tables. And if you don't believe me, you should see, they take off their shoes, they feel it as a table, and they're doing things together. This is what I learned. You know, all things I learned, and also the idea that you should articulate a space. You should not make just spaces, very big spaces, but articulate means that you make devices that separate without separating people. I mean, it's a sort of making places, making space units where you are sort of forming groups, and at the same time, the other groups are also part of you. So you are part of the whole and part of the small group at the same time. This is what I call articulation, making places in a space. And I explain it with this scheme that, for instance, for a classroom in a school, when you make this, it's the same surface, but it is even larger. The space became larger and smaller at the same time. So articulation is making things larger and smaller at the same time. And it allows you to work as one group, giving a lesson that is interesting for everybody, or to have your own circle, different from maybe the other circle. And I try to find out in what ways you could do that. Just a study of all the conditions you could make for separating and at the same time keeping people together. You know, this is the idea. It could be a low wall like this. The differences in floor level are important, and also the height of a space may indicate the idea of a place. Also the light, the way the light comes in. So the whole series of design decisions have to make with it. So I come to maybe one of the most important words of the designing is creating conditions. Creating conditions for freedom and for privacy and for all the different social uh, possibilities. I started to make elements. So in this school, I made an element which is in fact, uh, uh, yeah, well, you don't know what it is. And it is, I found out that it is going to be used in different way depending of the circumstances. You know, when the people are going to eat, they use it as the place where they put the food um, to take out. And when they are working together in a project, they use it, and and they also use it to make a performance. I have something like 10 pictures, but uh, in this time slot, I just show you one, and I hope you believe me that this is all possible. And when you open this box, because this is a box, there are all the elements to make a big stage. You know, just wooden elements you can put in each other and make a stage for a larger uh, for a larger well piece of theater or whatever you want to do. And I found out, I mean, designing is for me is finding out things, is learning things. Uh, and I found out that in this big central hall, this is like an island in the sea. Everything, every activity is going to be like a big magnet is being attracted by this thing. And when this was a success, I tried to make the opposite, exactly the opposite, in the same, with the same measures, a hole in the floor, and with stools, and the stools you can put in, and then it's just filled up. You know, you can walk over it. And I found out that they use this when they want to read a book, a teacher with some pupils, and that when some people want to do some sort of project, or I don't know, just conspiracy or whatever, they find this a place to to do. And when this was a success, I also tried to do that in a larger scale, and I found out that also on a larger scale, this is working for a different kind of things, of course. But for larger projects, and you see, you know, uh, all these things, this is also, in fact, a means of articulation. Um, it works for connection of people and for concentration of groups in a larger space. You see also these people here, they have not the right condition to be, but they better could be here, for instance, you know. But I don't know. They have they prefer to be in this way. So I'm looking and learning what is going on. So what should I do next time seeing what I see. Also, architecture should not only connect people, but also embrace people. The idea that when you make a hole in a concrete column, all of a sudden you can take a photograph of somebody who feels, I don't know what he feels, but in some way the architecture helps to accommodate the emotion of, of, uh, of this person, this moment. And this way, I treat most elements in architecture. When you have a balustrade, I have in a sort of way um, formed it in such that it forms a place uh, where you can sit if you like. I mean, when you don't like, you're not going to sit there, but that also put your coffee cup on it or other things. I don't know, that is a feeling. It's just a general feeling of how to treat um, things. And of course it works. Uh, Otherwise, I would not have shown it to you. But most of these things, not always, you know, but most of these things, they work. In fact, I could summarize this idea with the word domestication. That architecture should help to domesticate our environment, to make it more familiar, to make it more home-like. People, uh, you know, should be able to come home everywhere they are. Uh, and this is going on. I have hundreds of solutions. When you make a column, why not give it a base in such a way? I tell you, people are going to sit there. They use it for their games. They put their things on it because you feel when your books or things you have with you are more safe for some reason when they are a little bit uplifted from the from the ground floor. And this is not, I mean, it seems to be an invention, and I could easily say I invented that. But I told you before, I invented nothing. I just used my eyes. And I can show you that even the classical columns of Bernini and the Piazza San Pietro in Roma are a lesson. I'm sure that Bernini was not thinking of old ladies sitting there. He had an idea about architecture, about classical order, and in this order he needed this base. But with our eyes we can see that um, except being part of an architectural ordering, it can also be just a place for old ladies to, to sit when they don't want to stand. And this is this is my transformation of, of the same principle. And also, for instance, when you have a handrail in the city, I saw that my children immediately, they were just out of the car, and they immediately started to handle this as a sort of gymnastics tools. And this put me on the track that what we make should not just be a handrail, but it should be more than a handrail. And you know, most architects make just a handrail because you need to make a handrail. It's in the law. But don't think about it. You must make, I mean, a handrail is the most important part of an architectural design. Believe me or not. I mean, when you are not quite okay, or the lighting is damaged, so it's dark, and you want the handrail to tell you this is the end of the stairs, and this handrail should guide you in the architecture. And I'm not going to show you the series of pictures I have of rotten handrails. I just want to make you realize that this sort of unimportant details, you know, are very, very important. Talking about buildings and cities, how is it possible that serious architects, educated architects, make such storage for people? I mean, this is just storage for people. And I also love horizontal lines, but you're not going to let people live in these places. And the ground floor is the most important part of the building. There you have the shops, and you should have all the places that are for communal interest. No, the architects in the Bijlmermeer or in all the other Bijlmermeers we have in the country, and not only in our country but everywhere on the world, have just boxes, you know, storage and that sort of things. This is sorry, but I think this is criminal. This is really touching the level of criminal work. And you know, this is the way they make to leave your house. It's really protection of people against one another. This is not exceptional. This is just the way everywhere these buildings are made. Please don't do that anymore. And very simple and not very expensive just adaptations, like such a thing starts to be already the beginning of that you when you have your neighbor and you said, well, could we drink a cup of tea together? How's your husband? Is he still ill, or is it going better? I mean, just very unimportant things. Architecture, real architecture, the downstairs architecture is about very unimportant things, about daily life in the first place. And we must not put too much energy in these special things to look how good I am. And you have to take me as architect because I give you an acrobatic building and not just like this, but like this, you know. I can't do that. And this is a little bit the situation today. So I'm going back to the ground floor of architecture. It's very unimportant and not very attractive, but I think it works. By the way, in 1917 in Rotterdam, they made this gallery street, Brinkman, after that with Brinkman, the Brinkman of Brinkman and Van der Vlucht, who made no, this is in fact the father of the Brinkman who made, was Brinkman and Van der Vlucht, the Vanilla factory. He made a street, a real street in the air. They were better at that moment. It's not true that everything gets better and better. You know, it's sometimes it gets worse and worse. And this was working like a street. And I just want to point out that I think that we lost streets. Streets are sort of basic, elementary thing. This is a street, oh, sorry. This is a street on Nias, an island near Sumatra, where there is no traffic and where people, where children are playing and people are meeting each other. And this is really a space, a room, I should say room. This is the Herman Hotel in Amsterdam, one of our projects where cars are only allowed to be washed, but not to be repaired. But for the rest, there are no cars. And it works really in the same way. And this we lost. We lost by making this sort of thing. Imagine that you have children. I mean, by the way, it's possible that you have children. I mean, it's not an obligation, but you might have children. And then you're living somewhere here, and you say to your children, go and play outside and see other children. That's impossible. They have to go in an elevator, and you can't leave them alone. I mean, this is what happens in Taiwan. You know, is people always need guidance of some grown-ups, and then they go to the playground. What is it? Speeltuin, garden to play. Playground. Playground. No, it's not a playground. Playground is what Aldo van Eyck made. Anyway, it's something with fences around, and you know, this is completely different from the idea what I think children want to do. You know, and this is street life in where I am living, and I'm very conservative maybe, but I think that this is important, and we should think it over, that we need things like that. And also, when you read Jane Jacobs, the American writer who was just advocating the street, was talking about eyes on the street, the fact that you leave your children alone in the street needs that you have some sort of eyes. Oh, is it okay, going okay? And this is, again, Nias, and this is Amsterdam, you know. So these are basics. I think these are basics. And today you see in good places, like this is the Houthavens in Amsterdam, and thanks to the corona, people have no possibility to go to terraces. They make their own terrace in front of their house, and they form a street. It makes me think of something, but I've seen this before. Oh yes, Vermeer, he shows you also the idea, the devices outside the door where you could sit, you could drink something, and also a passerby could say, oh, I need a rest, could also sit. So it's part of the private and also part of the communal. It's a sort of mixing up the public and the private. And going back to my own work, I learned from the Brinkmann Gallery in Spangen, and I was unaware of the Bijlmermeer at that moment. It was not there, I think. I tried to make a real living street, which is used. Sometimes there is just a party. Sometimes it's just the children playing there. So this is sort of meant as a sort of prototype for how such a place can be. And I made low lighting blocks, you know, so these blocks are used for low lighting because I didn't want over radiating in this house here, so not here the lighting, but downstairs. And I made it in such a way that I think, well, lighting is such a just an auxiliary thing. We could make them also as tables. When you make them as tables, people are going to sit there outside, meet each other, etc. Well, I have to give you the place. Just two more pictures. This is what you see here is in fact the idea of architecture today. Look how beautiful and how good I can make that. And in fact, it is always outside. Instead of making inside architecture, I learned this from Aldo van Eyck, is always making things more interior than before. Making things interior. When Aldo van Eyck was appointed as a teacher at Delft, there was only a place in the interior department, and they asked him, would you mind being in the interior department? And then he said something like that no, this is where I am at home. Architecture is always making more interior than exterior. That's a sort of simple truth. And as an opposite of this, I have the Epidaurus theater in Greece, and two cultures, and this is only outside. There is no inside in the thing. There's one famous person who is living in that block of stone, and that's it. And this building, as long as you accept to call it a building, there is no exterior because it's just dug from the ground. It has no exterior, and I think we should really more concentrate on the interior and less on the attractiveness of the exterior. I could say much more about the two pictures, but that's for the next time. I finish with this picture. It's a sort of funny picture, and I also, when there were no telephones, mobile telephones, yet I always had a small camera with me. Sometimes you are walking somewhere and you say, wow, you take your camera, check. So this is a sort of incidental photograph. And when I came home, I realized what I had photographed. I mean, this ladies, they adapted to the situation. The terrace was full, and they said, oh yes, but then put us a table in that gap that the cars left for and we accommodate them. And it's exactly the right measure, you know, they exactly fit in between these two cars. It's unbelievable, you know. There's no architect who is so clever with his measures than what accidentally happened here. And this for me is a sort of symbol what architects should do, what architects should make. They should really make conditions for living together, for freedom, for all the important things in life. Architects should make conditions to make people feel at home in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's quite a special day, quite a special event also for me personally. It should do. Okay. Was a rather intriguing title you gave. Digital making architecture, of course, kind of enforced by the times digital, and social change. And this social change kind of triggered a line of thought. I was kind of reflecting on it and thinking like, okay, social change. What is this now? Kick out Zwarte Piet, or is it Donald Trump, or social change? And I started to realize, contemplating it, that I started to have this kind of strong relation with the pace of our profession, the speed of the profession. Because social change can happen, they're like waves, short, fast, but they catch your eye. But under the waves there are tides, they move. But the interesting thing is that I will show a project, the Leiden Town Hall, which we are renovating. And we started that project when Barack Obama was still president. That feels like that's ages ago. So projects that we work on, they move slow. We have an incredibly slow profession. So social change kind of seems to trigger this idea of speed, of, you know, you need to react to everything. And when I go running with my friend Cor de Boer on Saturday morning or on Sunday morning, we discuss the waves. We can discuss perhaps the tides. But as an architect, I feel deeply connected with what's under there. It's just like the currents of society and the things that we kind of relate to. So social change for me is very much about time, slow time. And when things move slow, you have to contemplate perhaps continuity, and you have to contemplate the transformation of it. So where Herman was talking about transformation as well, I do it also, but perhaps from a different point of view. Continuity and transformation. I work on two different places, and I do that with a team of people that I very much enjoy and love working with. We have a small studio on the Johan van Hasseltweg in Amsterdam, and we have a studio on the Geroldsstrasse in Zurich, where we work together with Zeno Vogel and his team in Merce Portel. That has its reasons. But also, standing here today in this room is somewhere interesting for me. I graduated on the Eindhoven University 30 years, 1 month and 2 days ago. And I received my diploma here in this very space where I stand now. So that also kind of triggered this, okay, what changed, what happened, what were my basics, where I started from. And studying here was studying with Rudy Uithaak, my graduation professor, the late Ben Loeracker, who was immensely influential on my generation of architects. It was studying with Wim de Hoop, but I think foremost all with Lex Kersenmakers, somebody who really educated our generation of architects, somebody who taught us the joy of making, that you could think through making, that you could think through materials. It was very much hand-on. It was a very much kind of hand-on way of being educated as an architect, and I enjoyed it very much. And it kind of it has been very constitutional to me on how I think about architecture. I'm very interested in making and materials. It's also very interesting that 4 years later I received a diploma, and Herman, you are there. You signed off on me being a master in architecture degree. And the Berlage Institute that you conceived and guided in that period has been incredibly important to me. It was a place of, it was an international place where people would meet, where architects would come in and out, and you would meet really great fellow students, great architects, and I learned in those 2 years that I spent there a lot. People like Tony Fretton and Elia Tsengelis that were around were immensely influential for me. I met Zeno Vogel, that I run the studio on Geroldsstrasse in Zurich today with. We work together still on those projects 30 years later. But perhaps most important person in the school to lecture was Kenneth Frampton. By that time he was finishing off the studies in tectonic culture book, and he was lecturing. He came to the institute and he would lecture on each chapter. We were his guinea pigs. He was trying out the chapters on us. Did we understand it? Did we get it? For me, that combination of thinking through making and tectonic culture were like, they constituted of who I am. That is 30 years kind of development. That's not like small waves. That's not the tides. That is diving deep. So, and from the beginning on, I must say, when I was graduating on the Berlage Institute, that was like super Dutch. That was like, was important. Was like, you know, there was, everybody was looking at that internationally. And I felt from the beginning on somewhere uncomfortable with it. And later on, I started to realize I was perhaps much more on the right hand of this thing. I was perhaps much more kind of interested in supernormal. It's not the architecture of the spectacle, but it's the architecture of the everyday, of the things that we have and the things that move slow. So those 30 years after graduating here, I had to think, okay, what now really changed? What reflects in my profession? And Super Normal as a book has a predecessor, and that's Das Gewöhnliche Design. That's from 1974, I think, this book. And there's a great sentence by Balzam Brock in it. He says, we must analyze and understand our contemporary everyday world as it were the everyday world of a historical society. So kind of take distance, dive deep, you know, look at the currents rather than the waves. And when I look at the currents, and which might reflect in my work in a way in those 30 years, what changed? I mean, we discussed at the Berlage Institute the issues of urbanization. Well, all my projects are highly urban by nature, and I think the speed of urbanization only increased in those 30 years. So that's a real change. Here in the university, we had a professor called Peter Schmid, and he was talking about sustainability 30 years ago. He asked us to make a kind of test house out of straw. And we were thinking like, oh my God, what is this guy doing, you know? And we didn't understand him, but actually he was right. He was really, really way ahead of his times. And he was kind of talking us already into the world needs sustainable thinking. You young students should start thinking that. And that past 30 years have been about sustainable architecture, have been discussions about how do we treat sustainability. An interesting one, and I don't know how that kind of changes architecture or reflects architecture, but when I was studying here, we were 80 students, and out of those 80s, 10 were women. If I enter now an average architecture school, at least half of the students are female, and there's a fantastic, I would say, feminization of our profession. I don't think it changes the content of what we deal with, but the way we handle things, I see changes. I see changes in that very, very big wave that we're part of. And last but not least, a very important one, digitalization. I did my graduation work in this school drawn by hand. I started the office drawing by hand, and in the course of time, everything became digital. Even today, I'm a bunch of pixels on your screen tonight. So digitalization is really there. But what interested me as an architect most and for all in that process of digitalization is actually its counterpart. When you close down your cell phone or your iPad or your laptop after this lecture, you might put it in a leather case, or you put it in a felt case, or you put it in, I even recently saw somebody putting it into a wooden case. And that kind of interests me very much because it shows the kind of counter movement under digitalization. And I think what I learned here in the school and also what Kenneth Frampton taught me really hard was material and detail tectonics, they do matter. They're the core of our profession. So we work on housing, but in the past decade, the amount of projects that we work on which involve adaptive reuse has been growing immensely. Super Dutch was about new buildings, was about the spectacle, was about the future. And interestingly enough, in the past 10, 15 years, adaptive reuse of existing buildings has really become a very, very, very important assignment in the architectural profession. So if we talk about deep currents and change in architecture, the way that we deal with existing buildings have become a very important assignment, I think, in our profession. So that reflects, these are buildings that I work on with our team in our offices. So I thought, making architecture social change, perhaps discuss continuity and transformation in 4 projects with a small postscriptum to it. And for the first one, I of course didn't have to go far. I just have to step outside this building. This is images of the original University of Eindhoven campus. I think this building now has a kind of fantastic name. We would just call it E Hoog. And it was designed by Siebold van Emden, and who was basically responsible for much of the university campus. Several years ago, we were asked to introduce the first student housing, a dormitory project on the campus. Of course, kind of interesting when you grow up on a school that you can contribute to the campus, which was kind of very interesting to do. But it was also this generation of buildings that I was really interested in. So it has this idea of a core, kind of shifted volumes that always make them look slightly smaller than they actually in reality are. And this is then this kind of very ambitious campus plan. So we are here at the moment. That's the main building, main building. And the first dormitory building was kind of projected opposite of the sports complex. The building had to be constructed incredibly fast. We had a building time of a little over 1 year for quite a large building with 300 student housings in it, housing units. And we designed a building that basically had this theme of, let's say, a shifted volume in it. So that the volume, like many of the buildings here, kind of recompose itself. It has a different proportion through the way it's organized. And from the beginning on, it was clear we had to do a prefabricated building. Otherwise, we wouldn't reach for the speed of construction that was desired upon. So we designed a building that is basically load-bearing facades with a load-bearing wall in the middle that has a communal facility here on the end of the corridor, and that has, let's say, an entrance and a bigger hallway with a kind of double high void space in it to have those connections between what is usually in a dormitory building, like what Herman says, this kind of stacked floors. And within the very tight constraints of the building, we designed a middle part with individual units and then the kind of collective units and the living rooms in the front and this kind of collective terrace on every floor on the outside. A ground floor with bike parking and a ground floor with a kind of large entrance space, which kind of houses this kind of informal collectiveness that we were looking for, but within very strict margins. And from the beginning on, I was always very fascinated with this kind of curtain wall facades on the university campus. This Siebold van Emden designed really fantastic curtain walls to the university buildings. And we thought, okay, we have to make a load-bearing concrete building, but somehow we wanted really to resonate the building with its surroundings. So we started to think about the expression of the load-bearing, the expression of the unit, the rhythm that it makes, and also the way it gives a certain scale to a building, how you could make a composition out of that. And then we had to go to the factory. It's the best thing I love about architecture is about visiting factories, because that's where you start to see things, where you start to understand the material, where you start to understand how things are actually constructed. So we went around, and the guy who was leading the workshop, he was like super proud because he just got this like new machine. And it was a polishing machine, so he could quickly polish panels and he could polish everything. So we asked him, okay, is it difficult? He says, no, you can put an element and then you can polish it. So we thought, okay, that's like super interesting, because usually concrete has this kind of very sometimes beautiful gray tones, but actually when you polish it, you start to bring out the content of what it is. It starts to be almost terrazzo. It starts to have a shine to it and a certain richness. So we thought we work with that. And of course, prefabrication is in itself is a fantastic process, because you can test things, you can make mock-ups, you can prepare it. So all the building components came, including glass, including window frames, everything just as units that they could stack them very, very fast. I think on the building site, at the peak, there were about 20 people working. It was a completely prefabricated building. Stacked in this way. So it's a corner situation. Basically, stacking the walls, crossing the floors, stacking the next floor, and go on and on and on. Speed of construction, but you can play with that. You know, it can be your friend. It can be the compositional tool. You know, here you see these ribs that are shiny. And just by shifting the bands slightly up and down over the windows, we could conceal, of course, the joints between the elements, which is always like this big question. If you build in prefabrication, how do you solve the joints? Are the joints like this one part of the composition? Or are the joints, like in this situation, concealed behind the frame? Gives a fantastic view of the campus. It gives this kind of balances between scales. You know, it's a standalone building on a campus in the green, so it needs a certain presence. At the same time, it needs a certain refinement to it, which the ribs and this kind of polishing of the ribs really brought to the building. And of course, this shifting really brings fantastic proportions to the building. And as it stands today, I know that it gets now its relatives. There's going to be 2 more of these type of buildings designed by Ton Venhoeven along on the campus. And they build up this series on this side. This project was, the campus was of course about being visible, about being present. This project is a project that we work on for quite some time, which is a renovation of the Town Hall of Leiden, which is a fantastic building with a very complicated history. And the interesting thing about working on existing buildings is you are there as an architect, you design a lot, but actually perhaps the main goal is to be invisible. You know, the best transformations, you think like, what did the architecture actually do? It's really, really, really hard working to get to that point. So Leiden Town Hall, originally designed by Lieven de Key and Ludo van Bentheim in 1600. And been part of the Leiden history for so long time. You know, this is a painting by Cornelis Springer from 1870, showing this Renaissance facade on the Breestraat of the town hall. And the town hall is really, it's a part of the history of the city. So if we talk about continuity, here it is. But it comes with transformation. It must have been cold on February 12, 1929, because somebody left on a stove. And the stove caught a fire, and not only did the town hall burn down, but the entire block around the town hall burned down. And it was so cold that it literally froze the facade. It was the last part that they could really keep, this facade of Lieven de Key. So that remains up until the day of today. It's just a facade. It's fantastically restored. It's been brought back to its original situation. But behind it, there was a really big empty gap. And the question, of course, was like, what do you do with it? First, there was a proposal by Dudok, who kind of projected a second version of the Hilversum Town Hall behind this facade. That was not accepted. And then there was a competition. And on the final round of the competition, Kropholler and Blau arrived with their plans. And Blau eventually won the competition and got to build the town hall. And he built the town hall. So here you see the historic Lieven de Key facade. And it's only the facade here that remained. And this entire town hall that sits behind it is designed by Cornelis Blau. So here's the architect in the magazine. Here's the remains of the facade. And this is the work he had to do, filling this empty gap. And if you look back on what he did, he actually developed a very, very interesting, from a typological point of view, town hall. This was the situation before the fire. So this is the facade. This used to be the town hall. These were all the houses. The Vismarkt is here. The Breestraat is on this side. And after the fire, this is what was left. So his plot, his design was this. And he was educated in a traditional way. So the first thing that he did, I have to find my pointer, yes. The first thing that he did is that he projected basically a classical Beaux-Arts typology of a double court building behind it. You find town halls all over Europe based on this typology. And then he started to manipulate this typology behind the facade in order to make it fit with the surroundings. And the first thing he did, most importantly, he said, a town hall needs a square. So I cut out half of the figure and I turned that into het Stadhuisplein. So the square that kind of aligns with the fish market and up to the day of today is like a beautiful square in the city. So he has a square and he has an inner garden. And around the inner garden, he organizes with the middle corridor, the rooms. Then he cuts up the building in smaller pieces. So he kind of fits this model to the kind of medieval surroundings of the city. Adding a small house here, adding a bell tower here, adding a small extension in front of a very big building here. But typologically, still kind of in line with the original thought. And then he organized the building. He says, like, in this part, we put all the offices, so the rooms for the mayors, for the elderly men, for the staff, everything here, and all the public programs we organize in this L-shaped building, and they overlap in this kind of middle part. So let's say the council rooms are here, the main auditorium space is on ground floor here, and interestingly enough, the Breestraat itself is a full story higher than the entrance along the Vismark. So here you see all the stairs coming down into the square. But Lieve de Kei put this fantastic big stair, which means that all the main rooms in the town hall are on the second floor. Not ground floor, not first floor, second floor. So typologically, it's a very complex building to work on. So here it's from the other side. Here you see the fantastic square that Blauw envisioned. He put a tower, he made this like big volume, put a small volume in front, put a very small house here. You have the stairs coming up, the arcades, and it really fits the place. It's really, urbanistically, it's a fantastic project that just sits very comfortable in the city. But Blauw was also an extremely modern architect. If you look at the rough construction of the building, it's a full concrete building. It's a full modern construction made in 1930 with canalization, everything in it. And I know of Italian architects that tried to construct this without cladding, but it's concealed in, let's say, within this tower, this kind of traditionalist tower, has this fantastic concrete construction in it. We were very kind of intrigued by it, also by the concrete roofs that it has. So he built a modern building. He clads it in a kind of traditional vocabulary on the outside to make it fit with the city. He scales it down, and then he clads also the interior of the building. It stops. He also clads the interior of the building, and not just with cladding. I mean, it's probably the most richly decorated town hall in the Netherlands. It's full marble. It has panels of Escher in it. It's all included art. It's an amazing building, but it's somewhere fascinating. This kind of traditionalist outside brickwork, and then this grandeur on the inside. Everything is cladded in the building. Everything is about tectonics in the building. And there's these kind of magical moments, and our photographer René de Wit captured, I think, this in a beautiful way. On the left, you have this typical light that you get through the 16th century or 17th century facade, you know, glas in lood. And then you look into the spaces that Blauw made, and it's this layering of history, it's continuity, if you like, which is really fantastic. But when you explore the building, you start to see that over the years, they started to change it. So the window at the end of this corridor became an elevator, killing typologically the space. The second inner court in the 1990s was covered with a very big glazed roof, which put a kind of bluish light in it with horrible acoustics. And they did it so on ground floor they could have like the parts where you get your passport and your birth registration and stuff like that. But the acoustic is so horrible that the people that work there, they needed to sit under a canopy. And in order to make it look like a garden, they just covered the whole thing with plastic trees. And they completely started to lose sight of the original idea of this building. So effectively, our proposal for the town hall was really to get it back to this kind of typological scheme. So to make the garden a garden, we were the only ones to propose to remove the roof and really make a garden again in it, and kind of connect the garden with the kind of main receptional areas on ground floor of the town hall. In the middle on top, you see the historic council room, and under it we proposed, let's say, the new commission rooms, which in, let's say, contemporary politics are just as important as the town hall room. So typologically, we restored this building. It was kind of bringing it back, but bringing it back is, it's like small incisions in the building. You touch it here, you touch it there, you remove this, you remove that, you place that back. And it's a sensitive game. So in red, these are the interventions. And you see them. We are everywhere and we are nowhere. And it's a difficult project to work on. It has many dilemmas in it, but it also offers this kind of fantastic opportunity. So the garden will be a garden again. But the garden also offered the possibility to tell a story. You know, there is Leiden, of course, has a fantastic botanical tradition in it. So we thought we need to reintroduce the tulip tree that was brought to Europe by Boerhaave. And this tulip tree stands in the garden, in the biotopische garden. But it also kind of inspired Wolkers into Het Grote Gele Doek, which is a fantastic painting. So elements like this could be reintroduced and rethought through the history of the building. In architectural terms, the planning for us was to show perhaps this kind of concealed modernity of the building. Not decorated, but show the construction. Show as much as possible of that concrete construction that is hidden on the outside under this kind of traditionalist skin, and on the inside in this kind of covered in all this marble. So new rooms required along the garden. And these are recent pictures from last week where we opened up the ceilings on the attics in order to have this construction and to have workspaces. But what's fantastic is we leave the constructions as they are. This is the moment where you see actually the hidden part of Blauw. So our main architectural interventions are about perhaps cleaning up, showing, uncovering walls that were kind of hidden. This has like Katsura qualities to it, these spaces. And sometimes extending, sometimes bringing in the new, but not being visible. So Anna Tavalini and our team worked meticulously on how can you extend these marble floors, because partly they are gone, partly we add new rooms to it, which just in terms of the atmosphere should resonate with it. So we developed these terrazzo samples that kind of resonate with the colors and the textures, but also with the shininess of the floor. And she developed these patterns that kind of extend. They're obviously new, but they try to resonate with what was there. And in the end, you do a lot. You destroy a lot when you do these kind of projects. So that's always the scary part of it. Is these moments when I stand in this space where I think like, we are really doing a lot here. This is really, we are really pretty invasive in this space, but we do it in order to get to, let's say, this point. This was a picture of last week, and in a year, I hope to be here with the building. Showing Blauw, showing this kind of hidden layer in his work, the modernity of that work. The third project I would like to show, which is, we move a little bit south to Delft. We were asked to design the municipal archives in Delft. And Delft is of course, like Leiden, that's full of history, that's full of tradition, if you like, that's full of continuity. It's a brick town, and I really love it. I mean, I find bricks a fantastic material to work with. It's an incredibly welcoming and warm material that really fits with the Dutch tradition of building. And Delft is full of that. It's full of brick buildings, but Delft is also full of these type of white embellished entrances that kind of signify a certain importance in the city. And Delft has one of the most beautiful city archives in the world. Upon the opening, they took 2 books, and on the top being pointed at, that's the municipal birth register. It's open on the page of October 1632, and on the left part of that page is the birth certificate of Antonie van Leeuwenhoek, microbiologist and inventor of the microscope. And 7 days later, your Johannes Vermeer was born, and he's just on the other side of the page. So the 2 men who really profoundly changed history, they're in this birth register. That's what archives are for. So you realize that these 2 boys, they grew up together in Delft, which wasn't big. And talking about change, the bigger book in front, that's the municipal court recordings. And the pages are open. It's actually 6 pages, I think. They record between 10th and 13th of July. On the 10th of July, Balthasar Gerards assassinated William of Orange. And he was executed 3 days later, but actually he was tortured for 3 days. And the municipal court recordings record up into detail what they did to the poor man. I mean, we couldn't do that anymore, but it records change. It shows how we changed, and for that reason, these archives are incredibly important. You know, they are the background. If we talk about change and continuity and transformation, these are the backgrounds that really matter. The archives were housed on the Oude Delft. They had to move out because archives are highly technical buildings. And they chose a fantastic location, but not. A industrial wasteland area just outside of the city center, surrounded by huge boxes, aluminium boxes for infrastructure. And they said, yeah, the municipal archive will move here. So, you know, find a shape for that. Here you see the location, and actually the small canal on the left side is the municipal border. So actually the archive is outside of the municipality of Delft, strictly speaking. It's surrounded by these big boxes, but it's kind of confronted a small park strip that kind of started to connect it with the housing along. And as this place, of course, urbanizes, it will become eventually part of the city tissue. But this kind of frontal situation to the small park was very important to us, because we wanted the archive really to have a face, to show what it was inside. It was about designing almost a jewelry box to communicate the importance of this building, to communicate really the civic importance of it. And it's archives in a way, they are also simple buildings. Technically, they're complicated. Typologically, they're simple. The only thing that we kind of added to the typology of archive buildings is that since it is in a polder, it can inundate. And of course, everybody says it will not inundate. There will be no water in this polder. But eventually there will be water, and you don't want an archive on water level. So we proposed ground floor, offices, public functions, everything, all the archives go up. And they go up to a level that when this polder inundates, these birth registers, they will stay dry. So it's 2 floors of archive. And basically you sit under in the reading room and in the offices. This being the reading rooms, which we had to design. And this being the archives. And archives they're closed off boxes. They're concrete boxes, highly climatized, structurally complicated because of this kind of moving heavyweight shelves that move around. And in essence, it has no expression. So for us, in architectural terms, it was kind of very interesting to think of what kind of expression can we give to this building, that you start to understand that it is an important public building that is standing there. Small typological scheme, so this kind of public functions on ground floor, 2 floors of archives on top with all the machinery on the roof. And since archives tend to extend, they grow, you need to be able to extend the building, which was kind of the fun part of it. So you could say you build one, but actually you could do the same volume behind it and another one, as many as you need. And actually slowly discussions about extending the archive are starting. And designing the facade was a kind of adventure. It brought together kind of a lot of observations. Of course, there was this resonance with this idea of stacking and a bookshelf that you look at. Yes, the image is there, but it was also playing with references like, I mean, the artist Jan Schoonhoven is never far away in my thinking, and he grew up in Delft. He lived all his life in that city. So I thought that facade somewhere, his story needs to be there. But it was also a question of about using brick, because that resonates with the urban tradition of Delft. It was also a question of recomposing the volume, as I would almost say, because it was a 3-story building, and we always thought it was like too small for its meaning. So we developed a brick pattern that was repetitive. So here you see the various patterns of brickwork, and on the lower scheme you actually see how they are composed over the facade. They needed to be repetitive because otherwise the contractor couldn't build it. So he needed a pattern. And you see by the horizontal lines in the facade, we started to reproportion the 2 stories. I mean, the building basically started to look bigger. We gave it, of course, a kind of white plinth, a wide entrance to make it resonate with all these beautiful white entrances in the city center, and kind of building up a brickwork volume that builds up a facade, that builds up a public character to the park and to the existing housing. Corner details, always the most fantastic part in architecture. Extremely complicated to get a pattern around the corner. Relief is like the blessing of architecture. Frontal facade, looking at it, you know, making a presence, and then the building as it stands today on the park. So this is, you know, it's constructing a box. It's making a jewelry box for these kind of historic recordings. The last project, also a conversion, a renovation, put into our hands. This is the Trippenhuiscomplex. Is the seat of the Royal Academy of Arts and Sciences, and it sits on the Kloveniersburgwal in Amsterdam. The original building, it's a big one, almost in the middle, was designed by Justus Wingsboom. 1616 to 62 it was built. And it has fantastic paintings, kind of fixed ceiling paintings by Van Helst-Stockade in it. It's a monumental building. It was designed as a residence for Louis and Hendrik Tripp. And as you can see, the building has 2 front doors, and the exact division between the house of the brothers was in the middle. So Louis lived on the left side and Hendrik lived on the right-hand side, and they got filthy rich over trading arms and trading steel in their times. When they moved out, it had a kind of, for a while, a bit of a blurry history, but Napoleon seized it. He installed the Royal Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1812 on the right-hand side of the building, and on the left-hand side of the building, it used to house the Rijksmuseum. So the room that I will show later is called the Rembrandtzaal, not because it was painted by Rembrandt, but because the Nachtwacht was in that room for almost 60 years. It used to be a museum. The museum moved out, of course, in 1885 to the Kuipers building. KNW took over and KNW grew. And KNW now owns all these buildings next to it as well. So we talk about the Trippenhuiscomplex by now. It's the seat of the Royal Academy. When they approached us, they had a question. They say, we have a fantastic tradition. We have fantastic rooms in our building, but it's very hard to receive people. We want to open up to society. We want to be more part of a society. We don't want to be this kind of very closed off community of very, very bright people. I mean, this is the academy room. And through the small door, you look into the Rembrandtzaal. This is actually one of the few openings between the 2 houses. This is the Rembrandtzaal in its original color, painted like red, really red. It's really a red room. The reading rooms and the libraries in the building, it's filled to the brim with history, but it had a horrible way of receiving people. this was the entrance. So you had to go up, and there was a kind of handicapped elevator, and this kind of 1960s building that stands between it had a kind of split level. So on the lower floor there were all kind of facilities, and up was this kind of reception area. That's where you would be received by the Royal Arts and Science Academy. And as you would go deeper into that building, you would find a kind of dining area, and in the end you would find an auditorium with the we always used to call it a crematorium, because it was a place too horrible to imagine. And so the commission was to change that, to open up the academy, to give it the possibility to receive people, you know, to welcome people into their world. And for us, there were important steps in the design process. This is a drawing in which we started to draw all the rooms. Because the Justus Vingboom building is a building about rooms. There's one room after another room after another room. And so we said, okay, if you want to really have a receptional area that kind of takes you through the whole route and the way of receiving people and all the, let's say, the social rituals that are part of that, then it has to resonate with the existing building, and it has to be part of it, but in a contemporary and in its own way. So, and I hope the pointer works now a little bit. Yes. So we said, please make the entrance on the original entrance of the Trippenhuis. So the entrance that Louis used now is the main entrance to the KNW, or at least the public entrance. And the space was already there. It's beautifully restored with a kind of cobblestone floor in it. And from there you enter a first space where you can wait, where you can look back onto the canal. Then there's a second space where you leave your coat and where an existing elevator has been incorporated. And there's a third space where you receive people, where you can get a drink or a coffee. And there's the kind of receptional area related to the garden. And then there's this kind of antechambre where you can wait before you enter for a lecture. So it was really about giving form to this ritual of going to a place, getting to see a lecture, getting to see a presentation, being part of a debate, but in a public way. Very dark pictures, but all kind of architectural elements tried to resonate. Ceilings, floors, the use of material, the use of color, make connections with existing, make it resonate. On the left hand is this picture when it was the museum. There's a painting of the museum. And on the right is kind of this enfilade where we look into the depth of the project. And also here, when you start to do that, it starts out with simple ideas, but actually when you are on the building site, it's pretty invasive. We really brought in large structure, a lot of technique in order to make it feel natural. Big constructions to do this, to lower the floor, to get the floor on the level of the street, to make an appropriate height for these type of spaces, and that works as it is today. So it's finished about 2 years ago. So this is the entrance of the Trippenhuis. So this is the room of Louis. You go a few steps down and then you are on street level again. The main entrance area. This is where you wait, kind of connected to the Kloveniersburg wall, opening up the building, showing the inside. Going through this kind of progression of spaces. Leave your coat, get a drink, go into this room. Hopla. Have this kind of lounge or meeting room in front. Antechambre space. And then into the refurbished auditorium, which kind of plays on all kind of levels with the existing building. The facade was the only visual part. It was really a kind of, it was a construction, it was a lot of technique, it was a lot of interior design, and we got to design a little piece of facade, which is basically the part that kind of replaced this entrance situation. And of course, that was kind of a special part in the project. And we thought in its materiality, it has to resonate with history. So a metal facade as a kind of reference to the metal trade of Louis and Hendrik, thought suitable. One that would kind of resonate with the tectonic structure of the canal house, but at the same time a material that could resonate with the Bentheimer sandstone that kind of decolorized over the years and over the centuries. So we made a bronze facade for this building. It was a port, so the Guus facade, gegoten. All these panels were made like that. The joints were carefully designed, and I think Charles is looking in. I mean, I really love all these kind of small details on. It determines the size, how big you can make an element. So you have to design the joints, but the color of it kind of beautifully resonates with this existing facade. So here we are visible, but as architects, you bring much more to the space. A small postscriptum. These were the 4 projects I wanted to show you, but there was this moment where I thought on continuity and transformation, and that comes from an artwork that really hit me very, very hard when I was thinking actually the production of the artwork. This is another foundry where we worked. That's the Kunstgießerei St. Gallen. That's an art foundry where they have fantastic people working that make make bronze statues or metal statues. And in this project, they built for us facade elements. But as we were at the workshop, there was in one of the workshops there was a wax model, and it was a wax model of a dead phone, een veulen. And as I later learned, it is an artwork by Linde de Buikere. It's called Honte, and I saw it in production at the Kunstgießerei. And you have to imagine how a metal sculpture is being made. So somehow she had access to a dead-born phone at the abattoir, and she caught it with a silicon mold. Imagine doing that. You go to the abattoir, there's a dead-born phone, you catch it in a silicon mold. And then she took the silicon mold to the Kunstgießerei, and then out of the silicon mold, they made a wax model. So they made a wax model of the dead phone. And then when you turn it into a metal statue, you have to go through a process. You put the wax model, you put in a chamotte or clay cast. So what you see here are blocks of clay, and on the inside, it's a hollow space. It's the melted out wax. And in order to pour metal, you need to heat up first this clay, because there can be no moisture in it anymore. It needs to be super dry. But while heating it, you melt out the wax model. So you have a phone, which is dead, which is destroyed. You have a silicon mold of that, which you use to cast a wax model of the dead phone. And after that, you put it in clay and you destroy the wax model. So 4 times she destroyed the original, 4 times before getting to this point. And this is like a haunting moment, because you have nothing here. You have a hollow space. For the artist, this must have been like a crazy moment, you know? All this effort, and I have a hollow space. And of course, then you go into, you know, the act of casting it with metal, and then you have to destroy the casts in order to get the metal out. So that's the next time that you destroy what you have as an original, which is kind of, you know, it happens. It's a very pragmatic spaces, and in the end, you can visit this sculpture. It's on display in the Drongnofkapel in Ghent these days, and for me, it's a sculpture itself which is very touching, and her work is it gets to you, I would say. But what got most to me was the kind of production process. This is about continuity and transformation. She had to destroy the original 4 times in order to transform it, to get to the final artwork. So transformation and continuity is not about standing still. You make steps and you actually destroy things on the way. That's where I wanted to leave you today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. After these wonderful, very diverse lectures tonight. There is the opportunity maybe shortly for the audience. If you raise your hand, you have to switch off your camera. Then the organization can, Jamila or someone else, or Bob will let you in. So yeah, notify when you want to ask a question. Well, maybe first to kick off here, I would like to thank you for your wonderful lecture, of course. But Herman, can I ask you how you have been talking about social interaction between people, the detailed public space that is actually the main issue in your architecture discourse. And maybe there's also a very big, this idea about not discussing so much the iconographic value of architecture, but more the meaning on a small scale to the people. That seems to be like the core of the discourse. But maybe when we go back, of course, in the last decades, social space, public space has changed dramatically with upcoming of digitalization, the individualization of our society, etc., etc. Also like schools, where children are sitting behind iPads and laptops and so on. And maybe very extreme now having online teaching. So how can you react as an architect towards this phenomena? And maybe also, do you have to react as an architect?
In fact, in fact, the present situation shows very precisely how important these social contacts are. Mm-hmm. Just because we can't have them now, yeah. And that's what I showed in the street. That the street is better used than ever.
Yeah, on the same time, you of course also see that our much more traffic, a lot of public space, which used to be public space, has been interiorized, like our stations are not open, are not public anymore because you have to have a ticket. So our public space is being affected by the more cars, more traffic, more different use. So can we give it a new swing?
We should. We should.
And with what means do we have, according to you?
Well, I don't know.
We cannot kick out all the cars. Do we have can we have, is there a change in public space that we as an architect can accommodate?
We can kick out some cars, you know. There are some neighborhoods in Amsterdam where they put the cars in parking garages and they have the street free of cars. But first there has to be the notion and the need to act. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with this high-rise buildings, this high-rise housing. People think that you can increase the density with it. But we learned that it's very doubtful whether this is true. Because they need to be on a larger distance from each other, you know.
Yes, yeah.
So how can we make more density? That's very important.
But it's also a tendency, of course, that is going on, and how.
When I had to teach a group of students in town planning, I would say, okay, our density should be, say, something like 200, or if you like, 300 dwellings on a hectare. And how would we do that? And then they come with high towers and say, no, these towers need to have a long distance, so try to find different ways. What do you think of it?
I think what you showed, Herman, in the last slide is like, I think that's what we miss all today, going into the street. You know, I would love to sit between those two cars with the ladies. that would be, you know, we wait for that. But I think what you showed us today and is really this importance of social interaction and the many different ways in which you can do it, like architecturally designed in beautiful schemes, but also kind of informally organized by people themselves, which is just as valid, I would say, for the need that we feel. And I think more than ever, this social exchange will become important. So yeah, the full agreement.
But there might be the misunderstanding that I don't like the formal architecture. I like it very much, and I see these spaces and these facades, and I think this very important. And most of my time was spent on the formality of architecture. But I think it's not our assignment today. I think today we have to concentrate more on the social, because that's lost. I mean, I mentioned the politics. In politics, it's exactly the same thing. Not exactly, a little bit the same thing. That it is all sort of, you know, trying to keep the individual, and there's no emphasis on the togetherness. When we design balconies, I did not show you any balcony. The balconies it's all based on separation and keeping people private, and they're all suffering from their neighbors, their music, their
noise and everything.
and everything. And we should try to compensate that by more conditions for social life. You know?
Yeah. I see actually that there is a question from the audience. There are some questions from the audience. So I have a whole list of questions, but I would prefer first to leave the audience to, I see Lucas Hop.
Yes, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
You have to speak a bit louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to.
A bit louder, much louder.
I will have to scream then. I'm sorry. I have a question for Herman. Do you sometimes long to the past again? But
do you
at the same
sometimes long for the past again. Wait, I
Yeah.
have to repeat
And
it a bit louder. So do you sometimes
added to that,
long for the past again?
do you also see the added values of the current building techniques and the construction methods that are currently used?
And do you see the advantages of the current methods, building methods and techniques that there exist?
What is the current building technique? I mean, making buildings in the factory, is that what you mean?
yeah, for example.
New techniques, new materials.
Of course, you need to use all the modern techniques and the modern materials, but you have to use them in the right way for the right things. Do I give the impression that I'm old-fashioned and that I want old
It almost
things?
looks like you're longing very much to the past sometimes. But in current days, is it even imaginable to get back to the old days?
Kan het niet verstaan.
Yeah, it seems that you are longing for the past,
No,
but it's not possible to get past to
no, I'm not
back to the
I'm
past.
not longing for the past. I'm longing for the future.
Okay, very good.
But I think we should try to not lose fundamentals, human fundamentals, and not say, well, I'm sorry, this is the past. We can't do that with new techniques. I mean, there's a person who used the newest techniques to make pieces of the human body to replace organs and things, you know. I mean, with the modern techniques, we can do the most fantastic things. I mean, take the windmills. People don't like windmills because it seems that they make some noise or something. But I think they are beautiful. Think of the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower in Paris. In the beginning, they said, what is this for a terrible thing in our beautiful city? You know, it's like a technical thing. We have to remove it immediately. And then at a certain moment, there came a change. And now it's the most beautiful, the most symbolically part of Paris. So we have to change our eyes, you know.
All right, thank
I
you.
mean, it's not maybe not quite an answer on your question, but I want to explain that I'm not nostalgic.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
I don't see. Is there another question from the audience? Otherwise, I would like to ask a question to Jan-Peter. In one of your projects, you mentioned shortly had a fact in the archive that you had to take account with the fact that you have climate change, water, the risks of climate change, etc. Well, it's evident and it's known that we are maybe in face of one of the most important challenges regarding climate change, reducing CO2, the built environment taking up huge amounts of CO2 and energy consumption. So sideways, it's kind of coming into your profession, in your field, and into your designs. But can you maybe highlight or explain how that is affecting your work? sustainability, the fact that we have to change the way we build.
There is a story on sustainability in, let's say, the natural environment. I mean, the whole CO2 discussion, heating up of the earth, that's all there, and we have to deal with it. There's no question, you know, that's a condition for architecture today. And but at the same moment, for me, the sustainability does not takes out our responsibility to think about sustainability as a cultural sustainability. So the archive for me, most is about cultural sustainability, but it's you deal with an environmental sustainability at the very same moment. And techniques and materials, they change. And I think sustainability is like the big motor in this changing application of materials, thinking differently how to construct buildings. But at the same moment, I think half my practice is about reuse of buildings. I mean, the main energy consumption is in building a new building. So if you really want to be sustainable, you start to think radically about what we have, how we can reuse it, how we can redevelop it. So from a sustainability point of view, this kind of reuse projects for me are at the core of sustainability. And all the techniques that come and all the kind of techniques that are motivated by sustainability, they're all most welcome. And I think they're very, very important. But they're conditional for me in architecture. They're not so much the core of the architecture.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had a conversation with you a few days ago, Herman, and we discussed centraal beheer. Your building, and on the moment it's deteriorating, or it needs a new life. It needs a second, third, fourth, fifth, I don't know, life, but a new life. And of course, they're all, it's super important also in your work, how you talk about that, this idea about flexibility, so that buildings have eternal life in the sense that they can always be used in a different way and adapted, etc. So yeah, what had you showed in the first instance your has some new infill of that that building. So how do you see that? Do we have to build completely flexible as architects, or do we have to build very specific? So it's maybe the question between generic and specific, because you showed us very specific things. And so where is that play field also in your work?
Well, you know, I try to to not use the word structuralism.
Yeah.
But you are in fact entering in the idea of structuralism, that you have a structure. I mean, structuralism has to do with structure, but in fact it's a philosophical
structure
thing. But when I showed these amphitheaters, the structural thing is the fact that there is this built structure, and I showed you that you can adapt it in completely different ways. Mm-hmm. And this is what I learned, that we have to build structures, bodies, so to say, that can be used in different ways. And I showed projects for making a school in it, or making houses in it, and so on. But the whole money-making machine, which is now governing our whole culture, has hesitations. They're still thinking, well, it's better to make something new, you know. So this is also a problem of sustainability, to make buildings that are just also good for other things. I mean, of course, there are some monuments in architecture, like the town hall of Dudok in Hilversum. I think it's quite difficult to make this into a school. Huh? And the sanatorium Zonnestraal, they still have difficulty. It's very beautifully repaired, but what can they do with it? It's just unclear. So I propose that architects should think of other tasks than the specific task they are asked for by the clients.
But do you think that every building of you should be able to transform? So when you design or designed a building, was it always with in mind the idea that might be in 10, 20, 30 years, it could be completely transformed?
Yeah, maybe that's the case. Yes.
Yeah.
And when you see many old buildings he is making, for instance, you could see that they have the capacity to be changed in all different things, but do realize that everything changes. The education changes. The only thing that maybe, well, also changes, but not too much, is housing, dwellings. Yeah? People need also always sleeping rooms, and they need living rooms. But when you see the kitchens change, that used to be separate rooms, and today in the quite special houses, you have this island in the middle, with all the possibilities that the person who is cooking can also be part of the discussion of the man with the smoking their whiskey. And
no more smoking nowadays.
She can say, "Oh, this is not quite true what you're saying there." You know,
Yeah,
instead of being in this separate room.
No, finish.
No. I mean, I can go on, but I can also stop.
I would like to add something to the Centraal Beheer. It's part of a generation of buildings which is now, at this moment of reuse.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, the Centraal Beheer is a really specific case. And the only thing, I mean, I followed a little bit up on the discussions and the debates and everything. And you had so much courage to build that building. And I think what it needs is just a client now that has a similar level of courage to take that building, into where it needs to go. And of course you cannot do that with all the, if you like, structuralist buildings, but it just needs to find its right client now. You just have to wait for it. You saw it at the orphanage, what happened now. I mean, that found somebody that really said, I take care of this building, and the building is in fantastic condition now. I think the Centraal Beheer is just, apparently it just needs to wait a little bit longer for the right client, but it would be good. It would be
the right client will come. We are sure about that, and we'll have a second life. Guys, I would, yeah.
Who have questions also write to us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not talking for you, but for myself.
Okay.
I am apt to answer them.
All the questions. Okay, so that is a great gesture to everybody. I just heard that we are going to be kicked out very soon. So I would like to finish and close off this lecture. I would first of all like to thank you all very much, especially the speakers for being here, but also the technique who has been recording this. I would like to thank Anaki, guys, Bob, Jamila, Rick, great work. Thank you so much for every time organizing this and keeping architecture debate vivid in our faculty despite Corona. So I hope that also it will be possible to, it's been recorded, so I hope that everyone who missed it still can see the evening. Well, as you might have heard, Herman and Jan-Peter have offered that if you have questions that there was no time for, you can email them to them. So I would suggest email it to Anarchy, and then Anarchy will send it to you. So thank you very much. And well, maybe a small applause for you, for everybody.